Back when I was 15, Boy Scouts was a huge part of my life. My best friend Elijah and I had been through every stage together, from Cub Scouts to working toward our Eagle Scout ranks. We were entering our sophomore year of high school when one of our last summer campouts took a turn that still sends shivers down my spine. We were camping in some forest preserve. I honestly don't remember the name. It was one of many we visited over the years. What I do remember is that Scoutmaster Reed was in charge that weekend. After a group of about 10 of us arrived, he led us on a hike to our campsite. The air was thick with humidity, and the trail was overgrown in places. Typical wilderness. Once we set up our tents and grabbed a quick snack, Reed decided to take us on another hike, this time in the dark. He believed it built strong directional instincts. The sun dipped below the trees, and before we knew it, our flashlights were the only sources of light slicing through the thickening darkness. At some point, he handed leadership over to one of the younger kids for a little game. Find your way back. It was meant to teach confidence, but the kid stopped dead in his tracks and whispered that he heard something. Elijah and I chuckled, thinking it was just nerves, until we heard it too. A low, deliberate crack of a branch behind us. Reed went full survivalist mode, holding up his hand like a ranger and motioning for silence. Everyone pointed their flashlights into the trees. "It's fine," he said calmly. "Noise keeps predators away." That was the first time the word predators made my stomach twist on a campout. We hurried back, keeping close, but every so often one of us would turn and whisper, "Did you hear that?" Something was pacing us, just beyond the trail. Back at camp, we tried to shake it off. We roasted turkeys, cracked open cans of corn, and sat around the fire as Reed launched into one of his famously spooky stories, but he never finished it. Footsteps. Crunching leaves. Circling the campfire. Everyone froze, our gazes darting toward the blackened tree line. Even the scoutmaster stood up, uneasy. Assistant Scoutmaster Burke muttered, "This'll scare him off," and headed for his tent. Seconds later, the sharp crack of a rifle echoed through the forest as he fired into the air. Silence. No more footsteps. Eventually, we headed to our tents. Elijah and I zipped up inside ours, exhausted and a little rattled. I passed out fast, but I didn't stay asleep. Elijah shook me awake around 3 a.m. outside. The fire had dimmed, but its glow cast long shadows across the tent walls. That's when we saw him, a silhouette, a tall, broad man creeping between the tents. I thought it was someone going to pee, but Elijah whispered, "Look again." I pulled down the zipper just enough to peek out. My breath caught in my throat. There he was, some stocky man wearing a tattered work shirt and a sack over his head, like some backwoods nightmare. In one hand, he held a massive gleaming knife, casually dragging it along his side. He moved from tent to tent like he was shopping. I zipped up the tent silently, my fingers trembling. We had no phones, no walkie-talkies, nothing. We just sat there, too terrified to breathe, listening for the footsteps that never seemed to move far away. Eventually, fear gave way to exhaustion, and somehow we fell asleep. Morning came with the shrill blast of the Scoutmaster's horn. We bolted out and immediately told Reed and Burke everything. They didn't question us. In fact, all 3 Scoutmasters took it so seriously that they made us pack up within the hour. Parents were called. The trip was over. That's when the real horror hit. 2 of the younger kids, one named Cameron, the other Luca, reported that their duffel bags were missing. Not just their clothes, everything. When Reed and Burke checked their tents, they discovered something even worse, small holes carved into the sides of the nylon, just big enough to peek through. We were being watched. The Scoutmasters reported it to the local authorities, but we never found out who that man was or how long he'd been following us. It still haunts me to think about it, how close he got, how helpless we were. That was the last time some of those kids ever went camping again. And honestly, I can't blame them. They sent 5 of us from Houston to Colorado that summer, all part of a high-adventure program at Camp Ridgepine, about a 45-minute drive from Colorado Springs. The days were packed with mountain hikes, rock climbing, and whitewater rafting. It was brutal in the best kind of way. We pitched our tents near the Arkansas River, gearing up to raft its icy current the next day. I bumped with a guy named Milo, but that night, he wasn't the one I remember. Sleep and I don't get along on campouts. Sleeping bags are ovens, and the sound of nature doesn't exactly lull me. By the fourth night, I'd had enough. Around 3:45 a.m., slick with sweat and throat dry, I unzipped the tent for some air. The river was right in front of me, shimmering under the moonlight. That's when I saw him. Someone standing in the river, waist deep, motionless, facing downstream. The water was freezing, low 40s at best, and he had no shirt on. At first, I couldn't process it. Then recognition struck like a slap. It was Wyatt, one of our troopmates. I shouted his name once. No movement. Again, louder this time. He snapped out of it, spinning to face me like he'd just been woken up. His eyes darted around, wild and confused. "What the hell?" he shouted back, scrambling toward the shore. I met him halfway with the towel and shirt. "What were you doing out there?" I asked, more stunned than angry. I don't know," he said. "I just woke up, and I was standing in the river." His body was ice cold to the touch, his teeth chattering. He wasn't joking either. Wyatt looked scared. Back in the tent, neither of us could sleep. The next morning, we tried to tell the others, but no one believed it. They laughed it off. Sleepwalking, maybe. A prank, more likely. But Wyatt swore to me he'd never sleepwalked in his life. No history. Nothing. To this day, I can't explain how he ended up in the middle of that freezing river at 4 in the morning. And honestly, I don't want to know what might have happened if I hadn't woken up when I did. The last Boy Scout trip I ever took was in October 2008. I was 13, more quiet than shy, and I never really clicked with the other kids in my troop. That final weekend, we were camping in a state forest up north, the kind where pine trees blot out the sky and silence creeps in fast. The hikes were endless but manageable in the chilly air. On one trail, I drifted behind the group, needing to pee. I ducked behind a tree to do my thing, and that's when I heard it. Thud. It wasn't a branch falling. It sounded like someone or something planting a foot into the dry leaves nearby. Heavy, deliberate. I didn't stop to look. I ran, heart pounding, catching up to the group without saying a word. That night, I had my own tent. A few of the others did too, since our troop was pretty small. Lying in my sleeping bag, I tried to forget what happened. That was impossible. A sound interrupted the quiet, an odd, crackling static, like someone breathing into a phone speaker. It was faint, but close. Too close. It was coming from my backpack. I pulled it over and started rummaging through. That's when I found it. A heavy-duty walkie-talkie. Not mine. I'd never seen it before. I picked it up. The breathing continued. Then, in a low, gravelly voice, someone said, "I'm watching you, kid." I froze. My blood turned to ice. I pressed the button, my voice cracking. "Who is this?" Silence. Then static. And then louder. "I'm right outside your tent." I didn't even have time to scream before the fabric of the tent started pushing inward, like someone was dragging a hand along the outside. I did scream then, loud enough to wake the dead. 2 scoutmasters, Wesley and Torres, came running. I was shaking too hard to speak, but I held up the walkie-talkie and tried to explain. They looked at each other, then stormed off to lecture the group, thinking it was a prank. When I calmed down enough to speak, I told them the voice didn't belong to any of the boys. It was too deep, too cold. They believed me. That night, no one slept alone. We shared tents in groups of 3, and in the morning, we packed up early and joined another troop at a nearby site. I never saw that walkie-talkie again, and I never went back to Scouts. It's been years since that night, but I still hear that voice sometimes, deep in the dark when I least expect it. I'm right outside your tent. If you've made it this far, you're 100% a horror fanatic, and we approve. If you love our campfire-themed horror storytelling experience, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our daily uploads.